Hello, everyone. I am going to be talking about the ethics of Starbucks today. Ethical issues in business are complex and can vary over time. The following presentation gives information on Starbucks and the different ethical situations they have been in. Starbucks has been put in several different situations regarding ethical practices over the years. There are a couple different ethical issues involved in these cases and each had different resolutions. It's important to note that companies can take steps to address and rectify ethical issues. Starbucks, for example, has implemented various initiatives and programs to improve its ethical standing. They have also taken steps to prevent further ethical issues in the future. I'm going to be talking about their history, the issues and cases, and resolutions and future steps. The American company Starbucks runs the largest chain of coffee shops and is among the most well-known brands globally. Starbucks was founded by Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Bowker. The company's original location was near to Seattle's well-known Pike Place Market. This location was originally founded in 1971, with its main office located in Seattle, Washington. As of 2022, the company managed over 35,000 outlets throughout 80 different countries. It was the first to popularize and make a particular kind of cafe culture generally accessible to a big audience. The name Starbucks was inspired by the first mate in the book Moby Dick. The iconic green and white mermaid logo was also inspired by maritime themes. In 1982, entrepreneur Howard Schultz joined Starbucks as the Director of Retail Operations and Marketing. He traveled to Italy and was inspired by the Italian coffeehouse culture. Schultz convinced the founders to test the concept of selling espresso beverages and opened the first Starbucks coffeehouse in Seattle in 1984. Starbucks expansion started in the late 1980s and the early 90s. It went public in 1992, and by the mid-1990s, Starbucks stores began to appear outside of Seattle. The company expanded globally, opening stores in various countries. Starbucks started marketing coffee as an experience that encompassed purpose, environment, lifestyle, and community in the 1990s. Starbucks experienced tremendous development and rose to prominence in the coffee shop industry by transforming consumers' opinions about coffee and coffee shops. The man pictured in the slide is Howard Schultz, and he was the CEO up until 2022. Pictured on this slide is the new CEO that was announced in 2022. His name is Laxman Narasimhan. Also on this slide, I have some information about acquisitions that Starbucks has had over their history. They acquired Seattle Coffee Company in 2003, Ethos Water in 2005, Evolution Fresh in 2011, Tivana in 2012, and La Boulangerie in 2012. Moving on, there are several different ethical issues concerning Starbucks. Some potential issues include labor practices, tax avoidance, environmental impact, fair trade, and ethical sourcing, treatment of competitors and local businesses, and diversity and inclusion. Starbucks has faced criticism regarding its labor practices, including low wages and inconsistent work schedules. In some cases, employees have raised concerns about inadequate benefits and difficulty accessing health care. Like many multinational corporations, Starbucks has been criticized for its tax practices as well. Starbucks has been under fire for the environmental effects of its throwaway cups, despite its efforts to increase environmental sustainability. The sheer quantity of single-use cups adds to the waste and pollution. Starbucks has made commitments to ethical sourcing and supporting fair trade practices. However, there have been some debates about the effectiveness of these efforts and whether they truly benefit small-scale coffee farmers in developing countries. Starbucks has been accused of engaging in aggressive tactics that may harm local businesses and smaller coffee shops. This includes choosing locations in close proximity to independent cafes and in some instances allegedly driving them out of business. Like many large companies, Starbucks has faced challenges related to diversity and inclusion. In the past, there have been incidents that sparked accusations of racial bias, leading the company to implement training programs and initiatives to address such issues. I will go over this in the following slides. There are specific cases of Starbucks violating labor practices, having problematic sourcing, and discrimination. A broad complaint was filed by federal labor regulators against Starbucks, alleging unfair labor practices at its locations in Buffalo, New York, including retribution against workers who supported unionization. Another case details how several tea companies, including Teatley, Unilever, Starbucks, and Marks and Spencer, purchased tea from Sri Lankan estates. In addition to their already pitiful pay, the workers at the estates deal with ongoing issues such as unpaid overtime, ongoing debt, and deplorable and unsafe living and working conditions, including widespread sexual harassment and abuse. The last case was concerning discrimination. It's about a woman who claims to have been fired for being white and awarded $2.7 million. The only significant ramifications that Starbucks has had to deal with due to their ethical allegations are paying damages and accusations resulting in a damaged image. Their issues involve the financial damages and public image damage related to the racial bias incident. When two black men were arrested at Starbucks in Philadelphia in 2018, the incident garnered national attention and presented Starbucks with a serious ethical dilemma. The men were waiting for a friend, but a store manager called the police. There were claims of racial bias following the incident, which incited uproar. As a result, Starbucks decided to close the entire business for a day in order to provide racial bias training to its staff. In this case, the employee who was fired was awarded $2.7 million in damages. The other cases resulted in dissatisfaction from the public and employees. There were no punishments given to Starbucks other than them paying in the lawsuit. Starbucks had some damage to its reputation in the other cases that happened more recently. Starbucks brought legal action against Workers United in a federal court located in Iowa, stating that the union's pro-Palestinian social media post from the start of the Israel-Hamas conflict angered hundreds of customers and damaged corporate reputation. There are a few clear ethical issues involved in the cases that I previously discussed, one of which includes discrimination based on race. This was the Shannon Phillips case. She won her lawsuit against Starbucks that claimed she was fired because she was white. There was an incident that happened at Starbucks' store. As a result, according to Phillips, Starbucks was the target of a racial controversy and she was exploited as the scapegoat. Other ethical issues include violating working conditions. This is shown in both the sourcing case and retaliation against unions. The source where Starbucks gets some of their tea is known to have poor working conditions such as inhumane and dangerous living and working conditions, including sexual harassment and abuse, unpaid overtime, and ongoing indebtedness. The union case details how Starbucks goes against unions and their union leaders. There have been both positive and negative effects on society and the corporate world. For society, the positives are a number of programs pertaining to community involvement, sustainability, and ethical sourcing have been implemented. On the negative side, their use of dispensable cups, scrutiny over their label practices, and the impact on local businesses has been an issue. And then for the corporate side, more laws and regulations are in place, which makes it more difficult to do business. There is also an increased amount of ethical pressure. As for the resolutions, there have been no clear resolution to the union case. There have been some filings and petitions with the U.S. Department of Labor. In addition, Starbucks has also seen higher employment costs. In the tea sourcing case, Starbucks contacted their suppliers to understand the source of the allegations. There was also no clear resolution in this case. Lastly, there was a clear resolution to the case concerning Shannon Phillips and the racial discrimination. Starbucks ended up having to pay a lot. She was previously awarded $25 million in compensation for her wrongful termination, and then she received $2.7 million to cover the cost of her legal defense. There was also a temporary closure of 8,000 locations nationwide to train around 175,000 employees against bias. It also modified its policies to allow anyone to enter the Starbucks store and use the toilets whether they are paying or not. And here's a quick slide that shows that Starbucks does have a code of ethics and tries to follow it and maintain standards of business conduct. Lastly, here are a few things that Starbucks can do to prevent further issues. They can implement their bias training, continue to go with their ethical code of conduct, They can continue to question their suppliers, be careful not to violate any ethical standards in the future, and also participate in good corporate social responsibility. And here are my references. Thank you for listening.